Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie Pinero, speaker, filmmaker, and storyteller, teaming up with Terrence McMahon, retired CEO and best-selling author. Having built multi-million-dollar businesses and created lifestyle brands enjoyed by millions around the world, we've established a blueprint to do more and become more. Now we're joining forces to inspire you to share your voice and build the business and lifestyle you've always dreamed of. Welcome to Your Voice to the World podcast, episode 3, where we talk about sharing your voice
and building your business.
I'm Eddie Pinero.
I'm Terrence McMahon.
And today is going to be unbelievable. We're talking about finding your purpose and following your one thing. So what do you think? Last week was awesome. We got to keep that momentum going.
One of my favorite books.
It's unreal.
Yeah,
it ties to essentialism.
It does a lot. We were actually discussing whether or not, if you read this book on the surface, you can think it's the same book. Like, cut everything away and end up with one thing.
Right.
But I think Gary's book, Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams Real Estate Company, he has an amazing story that how he used the one thing to build that company. That's not mentioned in the one thing, by the way. I heard it on a podcast episode, a private podcast episode, where he talked about how he built Keller Williams. But it talks about creating something huge and amazing and very large, but not focusing on that giant goal, lining up a strategy and getting down to something that you can win today and putting all your energy into getting that what's in front of you done versus trying to knock over a domino too far out. He talks about the dominoes.
A lot of emphasis on strategy, right?
Absolutely.
Where I think the biggest differentiator for me on essentialism was like, okay, essentialism's a lot about figuring out what you don't want. Simplification. This is like, okay, now you have line of sight. Let's get it. And what are some ways to do that? So that's what we'll talk about. So you talked about this. We talk a lot about books, and since day one, this is actually maybe the second self-help book I ever read. And I remember we started talking about a lot of this stuff. It was one of your influencers as well. What about it do you value so much? Like what pieces have you utilized?
Actually, a lot of the things in my life that I didn't necessarily listen to. What he's a very good at is strategy. He's good at creating a strategy to get a huge result, and reverse engineering something down from something very large all the way down to what you can do today. Because he was a salesman, and what I heard him talk about is you got to meet your customer where they can say yes to you today, and I use that a lot of times when I'm training some of my coaching clients about recruiting. Like, everybody wants someone to go from digital stranger to top producer in their organizations, and it's unrealistic. They don't even know your name. Right. Like, that might be the outcome, but what you want to do is get them from digital stranger to knowing your name, following you, liking you, an instant message of some sort, and building the dominoes up from them. And that geometric progress, which the domino, in fact, we have a couple here. I had these made, these little dominoes that we made. The little domino, the 2-inch domino, can knock over a 3-inch domino. And a 3-inch domino can knock over a 4-inch domino. And that geometric progression never ends. So someone might not know your name, and you might want them to be top producer, but you got to get them to know your name and then trust you and then give them value and then create a relationship and then potentially do business. It's many steps ahead a lot of times. Yeah.
In other words, the littlest domino is not going to knock over the biggest one.
Can't do it. Yeah. It won't do it. And that's where everyone fails. And they I see it all the time. People are trying to hit their, knock over a big domino. My mentor used to say, people want to go to heaven. They don't want to die. Yeah, like, there's a lot has to happen to get the big result, and he does a great job of that. And all of his efforts gets focused on the one thing. So it's that magic question that Gary encourages you through this book to ask yourself, what's the one thing that you can do that by doing it makes whatever you want to do tomorrow easier or unnecessary? Yeah, and if you focus on that every day, there's always a next best move towards a goal.
A lot of patience involved too. I feel like that's kind of, sort of an underlying theme throughout the whole thing. Yeah. But like when he was talking about Bill Gates, his one thing was, computers, which led to computer programming,
Right.
which led to Microsoft and everything. But when you look at it over an extended period of time, it's like it goes back to what we always talk about with this cultural now, immediate validation. It's like we forget, like one thing, mastery in anything is a series of dominoes, but it takes time and it builds momentum. And like you said, the little one doesn't knock over the big one. It's a long-term play. Right out of Gary Vee's, he preaches that all the time. It's like patience, persistence,
Strategy.
Yeah.
Versus tactic.
Compounding.
Yeah. The tactician in business usually loses. The one who is strategic about what they do, vis-a-vis lining up.
Right.
Moves 1, 2, 3. There's an exercise to do it in the book to 10 or 15 moves. Because if you do geometric progressions, the little 2-inch domino, the progression repeats itself. I think it's 18 times to knock over a 2-story building. 27 times will knock over the Empire State Building just by that geometric progression. That's 27 wins from 0 to having such a big deal. And so, like chess is a strategic game, not necessarily dominoes, but there's always a mathematically best move on a chessboard, which is the one move that gives you the best chance to win. And that's how I look at the one thing when I'm doing any one project. It's like, what can I do today if it's about being more healthy or more mindful, or I just want to improve a relationship? What's one thing I can do to do that today that by doing so it makes the relationship better tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's a good technique.
Yeah. It ties into Hardy's compound effect too.
Yeah. There's a lot of crossover here.
Yeah. I love this area.
Yeah.
I think there's just so much relevance. And one of the questions that I get a lot when I'm talking to, whether it's people that watch my channel and my, social media networks, or just asking, with regard to their businesses, it's like the patience and the persistence. It's like, how do I know it's going to work? Right? Because you can be 2 years in and, we talk about the sort of the exponential thing, right? And it's like you succeed and then you start succeeding quickly. But until you hit that point, it can be emotionally taxing and devastating mentally. And so that's one of the reasons I think this is important. I'm glad it was one of my first, self-help books that I read, is because it's like you see it linearly. You see it as a progression. And that's important,
We talked about the lining up our dominoes in these books and building your business or sharing your message and building your business. It starts out with a journey. Just get going and then start to eliminate the things that are holding you down.
Right.
Get strategic about, what's your one thing you're going for. Work backwards.
Then it's a chess match.
Yeah, but what's beautiful about this is we were just talking, because what you do, if you do the one thing and you do 23 things over the course of however long, you're starting to build a habit.
Right.
Which is, guess what? It's our next podcast episode. Habits.
Yep.
Or, these books we're lining them up so that you can start from 0 to having a message and monetizing your message through your business. And these are great ideas. These are great books. So it's not necessarily a book review. It's more about how do you use the book in your life.
Exactly. Exactly. What can you take from it?
Yeah.
Slip
how
right
do you
into
use
your
it?
life.
Yeah.
And by the way, everyone's interpretation is different.
How about you, Stevie? How's your one thing?
My one thing?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing that stood out to me from this book was the time blocking, because I never really thought of that, like picking a time that I set aside every day to focus on something, because my day usually goes like however my energy goes. So that was a question I had for both of you, is what is something that you time block, or have you utilized the time block at all?
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, the morning is hands down like the holy time for me. I feel like the day, I try and keep blocks of time, but the morning kind of stays the same. So it's like thinking, journaling, planning, quiet time. And I just recently got back to that, and it's amazing the impact it has on the rest of my day. It's amazing. Like, I get so mad at myself when I skip it, because it's like, it's not maybe or if or whether it'll help. It's like when I carve out 90 minutes for myself in the morning, I get up early, my day's exponentially better. I'm happier, I'm more productive, I have more energy, I feel better about myself. So it's like, anyway, that needs to happen. And I'm back on the horse with that.
Easy question though. That's what one thing I put in that I do every day, and it's morning sessions. Like our product that we kind of evolved into just something you would listen to or watch into a process that I do every day as soon as I wake up. You know, I go through my morning routine, and I end up on the balcony. The big domino is I'm on the balcony and I'm quiet and I'm looking at the ocean and I'm getting downloads into a clear brain, a rested brain, a brain that's got endorphins, that's moved a little bit, and then when I journal, at the end of my journaling, I always map out my day. And what I do one thing. It's called 1 by 5. What's one thing that you can do today for your body, and whatever that is today, some kind of movement. Mm-hmm. You know, we ride bikes, we do whatever. And then one thing for my mind, and one thing for relationships, and one thing for learning, and one thing for earning. That's 1 by 5. And if you advance yourself in all 5 areas in a day, I know it seems like a lot. You can just do one thing, but just advancing. Those are 5 balls, by the way. In the book, Gary talks about the balls, the rubber balls, and the glass balls. Like you're juggling the balls, and the like your business ball bounces, right? Your health does not. It's a glass ball. It falls, it breaks. So you're always juggling balls because you know some things are going to take more priority than the other. But of course, in my case, my career was going well, and my relationships and my physical health were declining. Yeah, it's glass ball breaks. You can come back from a lot of things. You can even come back from physical distress. But there's no need to let it go so much.
Let me ask you this: have you noticed, like over the course of the past however many years, or maybe even your life, that it's the same ones that tend to break, or have you seen a depending on like the time and what you're going through, a complete discrepancy?
I mean, in my own life, it's been my finding the time to be healthy.
Yeah,
I mean that's
like physically eating and working out.
Yeah, I made it a priority. It's number one, because if I'm not healthy, I'm dead. Priority me. You got to be healthy. Nothing else comes from health. I mean, that's not everyone's number one, but for me it is. But that's the one. I always did well in business. I always did well putting points on the board. Yeah. But the rubber balls is a big deal. But morning sessions keeps you directionally on course.
Yeah, because you have to think about it.
Right, and that's as well as lining up your big dominoes. Right. We had these dominoes made. Look at this one. How could you knock that over? If this is a giant goal and you're sitting here, right? Me and Stevie did the exercise yesterday.
Yeah.
What was this? 900x?
Something like that.
Yeah. This was 1,000x the domino. But you can work backwards from that and line up the dominoes and knock it down. I think it's 6 progressions knocks that domino down from the 2-inch domino. That's strategy.
Yeah.
Now you miss one. It's okay. You're directionally on course. You got to go back and keep doing it.
Right.
A lot of people try to skip steps, and I that's when I see people fall a little bit. But
so this popped into my head. Difference between skipping a step and working smarter, right? And I say that because that has been a big learning curve for me, right? Mm-hmm. Ever since I sort of became or went down the entrepreneurial path, it's like, just because you're working hard, just because you're working 16 hours. Doesn't mean some asshole working 4 hours isn't doing more than you. It doesn't mean that. So it's it's being cognizant and balancing the two,
Yeah, they got a better strategy.
Yeah. Because time and output are not a 1-to-1
right.
Thing. And that's something for everyone to keep in mind. It's like it's not just moving to move. It's being methodical about it. Otherwise, that time is not knocking over that domino, although it may seem like it is.
Right. I mean, we're looking at your channel, which I think is at 200,000, and we wanted to get it to 1 million, which is 5x.
Right.
And you could be just missing one thing, and your one thing could be just testing. And I know you're testing thumbnails. I don't know a lot about it, but I see you testing thumbnails. You're testing ad copy. You're testing music. You're testing images. You're testing different languages. but that's
so close. Steve and I were looking at it the other day.
Yeah.
Like the analytics. So what's interesting is the retention on these videos is incredible. YouTube is not sharing them though.
right.
Why? That's something that's a tweak, right? That's and by the way, these thumbnails and this titling, it's taking me time and energy and effort and focus. It's just not the right energy and focus. So like once you get that puzzle going or that puzzle figured out, then yeah, I think that hockey curve again. I think.
But to your point, you're stuck on that domino. It doesn't mean quit. Doesn't mean stop trying. You just keep trying to knock it over until it works.
Yeah, that's life. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always a way. Start on the premise. There's always a way.
There's always a way. I heard I didn't hear him on a podcast. In fact, I heard this. Gary Keller addressed a private mastermind I'm in. Mm-hmm. He did it by phone. It was pretty rickety audio, but it was clear enough to know this, that he talked about how he built Keller Williams. And Keller Williams at one time was not the premier real estate company. In fact, they were the opposite of that. They had a good model. It was financially sound, but he wanted to have more millionaire real estate agents than anybody else. And his one thing was, what's one thing he can do that by doing so made whatever he had to do tomorrow easier or unnecessary. And he ended up writing the definitive guide to being a real estate agent, a millionaire real estate agent. He wrote this book. I just looked at it. Called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. So he wrote this book, and he lined up his dominoes, and his first domino was giving a real estate agent this book. Well, his first domino was writing the book. Once it was done, he got them to a seminar, which this book is basically a giant invitation to come to a Keller Williams seminar. And in the seminar, they teach the process, and then it would enroll people in a training program, and then ultimately they join the training and then become a Keller Williams agent. His system created more millionaire real estate agents than any other system now. Keller Williams is by far the biggest player, and it was because of 100% of his energy went into driving attendance into the seminar.
Yeah.
They did nothing else. They built the funnel so it worked, and they said all energy is just get people in the seminar. Very simple process. So
I forget if you said this at the beginning, but I remember hearing it in the podcast too. What do you call it? Like the lowest point of entry? Is that the term?
He said meet your client where they can say yes to you.
Right.
And he couldn't get someone who worked for Remax or Century 21 to join his firm. Like that's where a lot of recruiters fail. But he can get them to read a book. And the book will compel them to come to a workshop where they'll learn secrets on how to be a millionaire real estate agent, where they'll potentially enroll into training, and then the rest is history.
Right.
So his number one win was something he could win at. A lot of people when they're trying to recreate themselves physically or mentally or in business, they try to take on too much too early. They don't have a series of enough little wins.
Yeah.
That creates the habit.
Right. And it's just an incredible way of looking at things.
Right.
The lowest point of entry, that meet people where they say yes. I mean, for me, it's the video interaction. It's YouTube. And you build the relationship, and then all the steps after that are just, I mean, it's limitless. Like I said, that event where we had, hundreds of people there and met some incredible folks and great discussions and new relationships. But it starts at a simple, a simple dialogue.
We mapped out the dominoes when we looked at creating the product. Remember, we mapped out like how can we take a high quality, unique video and get someone to watch it. That's one art that you've mastered. You're arguably one of the best in the world at that, in the motivation space. So how do we get them to subscribe and see your stuff regularly? And now how do we get them, the next domino is to get them to enroll in maybe a podcast or come to one of our live events and then hire us or for some online learning or some coaching or our mastermind.
Right.
We have a mastermind we just created, pretty excited about, where you can learn, the insides of this process. And that is the whole evolution of client creation, is taking someone from a digital stranger to hearing your message to a higher level of learning.
Different value propositions. And something that you learn is people drop off at different points along the way. Mm-hmm. And not only is that great, that's part of the process. And it was really, it's funny. It's those little tweaks, the subtle tweaks that are real transformative in terms of how you're looking at business. Yeah. It's because when you look at YouTube, not as an end or, I guess the vehicle in and of itself, but a door. a giant door to welcome people into your brand and get them familiar with what you have to say and help them. But it's level one of the help and the value add. You know, I really like that.
Yeah. When you're creating videos, it's kind of interesting because you're trying to get someone to take in your content and who doesn't know you, doesn't know who you are. They somehow find you through a search. I think most of your clients, right?
Yeah, or shared or passed on or
So one of your one thing is to get someone to watch your video.
Right.
Then what's the next? That's the next domino.
I think subscribe. So like in the, I don't want to say funnel, but you know, just in the community, a part of the community. Subscribe, waiting for the next video. Because that's been my ecosystem. It's been YouTube and Instagram and my website. And so now, over the past 6 or 7 months, which is why it's been so exciting, branching out, doing live events and masterminds and, you know, taking the thing I do every morning, building it into a course and pushing it out to the world. That's just really exciting.
Right.
So now I'm looking at it a little bit differently, you know, because that was the end. It was the... you know, the ultimate, you know, it's YouTube. It's where I love. It's where I put all my energy and I share my voice. And that's great. But it's just the beginning.
Right.
You know?
Well, I've been with you so many different times now where someone's asked you the ultimate question. It's like, how do you make money on YouTube?
Right. Right.
And
it's like pennies, right? On the dollar compared to...
I know. I mean, I see that. In fact, we're together. Our relationship's because I wanted to hire you to do something.
Right.
I think that's what happened. I'm a live example of how a little domino can turn into something bigger because we've done business together now. Now we have a couple joint ventures. But I saw a video, then I saw more, and then I actually met you in a podcast. And then we got together, and then we did some business, and then we did a live event, and then now we're doing this. It was all the progressions of the domino because you're however you get someone into your ecosystem is depending on your skill set. I mean, sales funnels are not new ideas. They are heavily weighted into one thing. Like one goes to the next, and the whole idea of a sales funnel is to take a lot of numbers and drop them in the funnel and have a client come out the bottom, an ideal client. But we used to do the same thing, knocking on doors. We'd go down, knock on 50 doors, and we'd get 2 or 3 people to let us in the house, which was the next step in the funnel. And then they may let us do a presentation, which is the next step in the funnel. They may let us write a policy, next step in the funnel. Then we'd ask them for referrals when we delivered, and then we update the program. It's the same idea. But you can do it now digitally, and you can do it very strategically in this process. And that's the whole part of this journey. When we started out with the first book, all the places you'll go, and The Alchemist is about just taking some faith and starting your journey, because you don't know what you're going to learn on the journey, and you don't know. But when you line it up the way we did, cutting away, now we get the one thing, starting to look at what that giant domino looks like, and then next week will be habits, right, Steve?
Yeah. So I had a question for you. So we talked about there's the 4 thieves of productivity he talked about in the book. You guys touched on health habits, and then essentialism. We talked about saying no to things. Right. But the other 2 is fear of chaos, and then your environment, how it supports your goals. So I was wondering if you guys had to get over the fear of chaos, if you have chaos and it was just a part of the gig and you were comfortable with it from the start, or anything you could add to that.
Yeah, I think this is from personal experience. I feel like we're biologically wired to want to avoid chaos. We talked last week about seeking out clarity, and it's important, but it plays hand in hand with chaos. And it's almost like if you don't jump into chaotic situations, you don't have the opportunity to chisel it down to what's important, to prioritize. So it's almost like seek out chaos, figure it out, put the pieces together, become accustomed to it, get comfortable, seek out more chaos, and you can look at the dominoes that way. It is one sort of, if it was comfortable, you're going to talk about this in your TED Talk, right? I mean, if it's comfortable, every domino is the same. And you don't want that. You sort of need to seek out that chaos so you can harness it and stand on it. That's my take on that.
It's funny. We talked about chaos last week. We talked about in essentialism, focused pursuit of less creates results, which creates options, which creates focused pursuit of more, which creates chaos. And I think chaos and environment are pretty closely related, because chaos comes when you have a lot of moving parts in your life. And what the one thing does is, let's pretend everything's a feather, you just stabilize one thing. And everything else in relationship to that one thing is moving, and you will stabilize chaos, and you'll make it focus. In environment, you have a lot of control. I mean, one of the big ideas in my TED message is, to change the fruit, you need to change the root. And I think Covey and T.R. Becker both kind of have been credited with that. You got to cut away the roots, and one of the major roots you got to cut away is, if you want to change or recreate yourself, is your physical environment.
Right.
I moved, and we talked about that yesterday with essentialism. We both moved, so we created a new stadium in a new sport,
Right.
and we decorated it any color we wanted, and you put the right fans in there and the right personnel. That's a big deal. Your environment is huge, and it can all be designed very strategically. What I love about like Gary's book is it's very simple. If you are thoughtful about it, you don't know whether or not you can knock over 4 dominoes out, but you know what you need to do to get from where you are to the next step.
Right.
Like, there's books out there like 0 to 1. Like, if you want to lose weight, how do you lose weight? There's science. You need to put your body in calorie deficit. So you can create a mini experiment to lose a pound, and get data and positive feedback loops, and do it again and learn and learn. I've seen it happen a bunch of times. Anything's learnable.
100%. We talked about yesterday with environment, sort of the chaos of being, so like I live in an apartment where, I sleep and I edit and I take meetings and I make videos and I do everything there, and just stepping away and coming here to edit last night. Little things like that where it matters how you look at the environment and how you operate. It just plays such a big role in what you do and how you do it. So you got to always be tweaking that. I said this probably on every podcast so far, and there's a reason for that. It's, you are your own experiment. Mm-hmm. And it's no matter what you're doing or seeking to learn or move away from or cut or change, it's like you can't be scared to try, to experiment, to learn, and then you make those changes. That's why I think chaos is a good thing.
Yeah, changing it up is also really important. You see it in sports a lot. Quarterback will change teams, and all of a sudden their career will be revitalized.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't work, but it's a form of self-experiment. Someone's just in a slump. I've seen it in baseball when I used to play. People would do all kinds of crazy shit. They'd wear different color underwear, and they would walk around. They played music. They'd be in the dugout chewing on licorice or chewing tobacco, whatever it was that they felt.
Playoff beer.
They'd keep changing it. They were changing their little mini environment, rally caps. Right. It's a little bit of a version, and then a lot of that, I think, is psychosomatic. It's the placebo effect, but it's a big part of changing an environment. You'll see that a lot in different industries. Right. Big deal.
Steve and I were talking about this yesterday in the car. Like, when you visualize something, it's, once you visualize it enough, you start to subconsciously believe it. And your actions start to transform because your thoughts, right, are play a big role in creating your action. And it's not the universe, in my opinion, conspiring and like lining a path for you, but it's, you're now living up to this story, and you're knocking over the next domino because you believe it and you've seen it, and you're living out this like an altered story now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They
talk about that in the book, The Power of like Harry Potter. It's called transportation theory, that you get transported into the book, and that's why the book sold. So it created a fictional reality, and people just took on the role of the protagonist, and all of a sudden they're in the book and they're feeling things, and they're taking on the attributes of Harry Potter, and all kinds of books do that. But that's what's unbelievably incredible about books.
Yeah.
if you don't have an ability, you can connect to some ability or the possibility of the ability, the possibility. Is that a word? And
It is today.
Yeah, because there's certain things I can do today I had no idea how to do. And I did it with these books.
Right.
You know, we're going to talk about habits next week, which is one of my favorite subjects. But they all wander into each other because you can't start a habit without starting small.
Right.
And creating a win and a repeatable win. Because if you're not winning the habit, you'll drop the habit. It'll never get into that what they call the basal ganglia, that automatic mind.
If you're not getting that
Feedback loop, yeah. There's a lot. Next week's going to be a good episode because habits is like our wheelhouse.
right.
And there's also something I read when Eddie and I were doing the I don't know if we told you this, Steve. We were doing the motivation research, all the science of motivation, and we came up with this thing. Remember, it was called mental contract. No, it's called temporal discounting. So you take this big domino and you look at it like a big goal. Let's say you want to let's say you want $100 million. Mm-hmm. And, well, it's a better number because I've done this before in financial planning. Let's say you want $1 million and you're 30 years old. And you got to save $65 a month, right? If you do it for 30 years at a certain percentage, it'll be $1 million. What happens is the $60 is relatively small. The millions is huge and it looks giant to you. But what your brain does, through what's called temporal discounting, it makes the current expenditure bigger than it really is, and it makes the future goal a smaller reward than it really is. And those numbers, but you got to keep going. Those numbers will start to get more realistic as you go. And it's interesting how, because of course you can line up the dominoes, but temporal discounting makes you're psychologically biased not to do something to get a long-term reward because
Right.
It seems like it's not a big thing, but it really is. So you got to talk yourself into getting going until you can create that habit, which is all, I think, pretty heavily related to dominoes. The dominoes.
Do you feel that? Is there something like that? Because I've experienced that, where it's like you gotta almost trick yourself into, like, you have to create incentives that aren't there, and so, like, manufacture checkpoints.
Well, this is an example. I mean, this isn't something either you or I are trained to do, and we're doing it. This is our third one. It's a lot easier than the first one, right? Remember the first one we did? It sucked so bad we had to record it over. There's a lot of dead space because we weren't quite sure how to use it, what type of messaging. We're it's going to get better a little bit each time. Do you ever see an old podcast from somebody like who's the big guys like Seth Rogen? Right? His early ones weren't nearly as good as his current ones are.
Yeah,
right?
Gary Vee's first wine library.
Yeah, he's got habits, and he's got embedded habit. His team is habits. We got Steve, the dunking machine.
Yeah, man,
He can dunk right in front of us.
you can.
He's catching on.
But like that's what like these checkpoints on YouTube, right? So 100,000 subs, for example. That's a manufactured arbitrary thing. I mean, that means absolutely nothing. But you put that there because it's a sign of progress, and it's an opportunity to pat yourself on the back and reflect and be like, okay, we're going somewhere. And I feel like the trick in a lot of ways for creatives and people that are sharing and putting things out there, young businesses, entrepreneurs, it's like you have to build in checkpoints. Otherwise, you're going to be angry. You're not knocking over that enormous domino, and you're forgetting about all the space in between.
Yeah, feedback loop you need to have rewards for something,
Right.
And good feedback. That's Chick sent me how he talks about that in flow, which means that's when we're visiting on that concept of play, where you have a clear outcome, but you're getting instant feedback from whatever you're doing, like rock climbing or
Right.
jog. Like when you jog, you get instant feedback. That's positive feedback, which will help you keep going. When you're weighing yourself every day, for instance, in weight loss, and you're losing weight, after three of them, I've seen some people do it 10 days in a row, not lose a pound, and they quit doing things like they're not getting any feedback.
Right.
They're not. They're sneaking something. physically impossible not to lose weight if you do it right. But once they start moving and they get a couple pounds in a row, you'll see the momentum takes over. That's what's powerful about the domino effect.
It's just hanging on until it falls over, right? I mean,
Right.
in a lot of respects, that's what it is.
You just outlast everybody.
Yep.
That's-
Success is merely hanging on when others are letting go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a seminar for a bunch of young insurance agents. I still get called to talk to that group a lot, and it's an old industry. There's 3 people retiring for every 1 new person, and I looked at it and someone says, "What's one thing we can do to make sure we're successful?" I said, "Well, just don't die, because there's 3 people leaving for every 1 new person. Like you're basically going to inherit a big business or a client. Just stick in there and hang in there." And that was the kind of funny, because if you just stay in some businesses long enough to learn it, you will.
Right.
Even if the wins are a little bit, just to make a little progress. Some people they plateau too.
Patience.
Yeah.
Keller talks about the iceberg, and he talks about profit and productivity in businesses being, their focus, and that sort of what presents itself above the water. But that iceberg has 2 bigger pieces underneath the water, which is purpose and priority. And I think it'd be cool to talk about that for a little bit, because again, I'm reverting back to the realm of social media and the digital age we live. That stuff that drives us crazy, the get rich quick stuff, all that stuff. And people have this notion where even if it's like, oh, I can learn a skill quickly and make millions of dollars or make X or support. And it's like, if you don't dig deeper for so many reasons, things fall off. Right. And so, yeah, let's talk about purpose and then further funneling that into a prioritization of what matters.
I'll give you a quick idea, quick observation. You and I are having a conversation. We're trying to get attendance for our first live event. I would say it was going less than perfectly. Like, it was a PhD in how not to do one of these things. But what we did right was when Eddie was having a bad day, he goes, "This just sucks." He used a different word. And that's when you start to really question whether or not you want to keep doing anything.
Right.
Like maybe you want to go back to work for an insurance company.
Right.
But I said this. I read up a lot of your reviews. Like there's people that didn't kill themselves because of what you did on your World Within. There's people, I've read some messages, people that did things and they connected with your story and your message, and you had a greater purpose. You didn't necessarily make any money on it, but that message that person wrote to you gave you enough purpose and reinforcement to go write another thing, and that's a big deal.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and then when I was selling insurance, I was getting paid really well, but there were people that directly and indirectly, I mean, every year we paid tens of millions of dollars in claims. There was always stories about families that we sold policies to. Someone got killed, and the policy came, and the kids could stay in school, and their lives didn't get disrupted. There's always a why to why you do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And it drives to your point, that's what pushes you through the hard, because it's frustrating, right? Any industry's frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating when I feel like I have a message or a product or a story to tell, and sometimes it's a swing out of the park. Sometimes it's a swing and a miss. But I think if you don't have that purpose, right? If you don't know that the policies that you're selling are literally saving lives and keeping families afloat, why stay in the fight?
Right.
Yeah,
if you're in it for money, Emerson wrote once, "Who you are shouts so loudly in my ears, I cannot hear one word you say." And when I had people that I would train that I knew were not in it for helping people, because it's an industry where you got to help people. Like, you do what you do ultimately, right, to tell your message and your story. It's not about money. You could make more money doing lots of other things. As is true for me. But when you know if at the end of it, you look back, you wouldn't trade your life for any other, because of you, directly and indirectly, however you structured your company, people are better off in the world. You left your little mark. But people that are in it for the money usually don't last. Yeah. They get complaints. They get pushy. They call it commission breath. You can smell it on them. Like, people are like, "Man, get away from me."
Yeah.
You ever smell it on someone? They're just in your face. You know that something's wrong.
Right away.
Some kind of vibe.
Right away.
Yeah, that's what Emerson meant by that. Like you're picking up on somebody. It's sleazy. Right on, Stevie? Did you ever get pushed around by a sleazy salesperson?
Yeah, plenty of times. But what do you think about these? Throw it right back at you. What do you think of these 5 factors of happiness to kind of get around to that purpose?
What do we got? We got positive emotion and pleasure, achievement, relationships, meaning, and engagement.
I forget this part of the book.
Yeah, I do too.
You know what's interesting about the book? I remember, of course, this one question, the magic question that Gary asks you to ask yourself in the morning, what's one thing that you can do today that by doing that, and not only, if you do nothing else that day, makes whatever you need to do tomorrow easier or unnecessary. I think what he means is whatever that one thing is that gets you to that giant domino, like this domino, this huge beast of a domino, will that make you happy? Because it might not be a lot of fun getting there.
Yeah.
I remember when I had people literally crying, thinking they're going to leave their career because they couldn't afford to last. Because in that industry, you're underpaid for a couple of years. In fact, in business, you're underpaid for a period of time. To be overpaid forever at some point. And sometimes it takes 2 years, sometimes it takes 10 years. But at some point, you'll if you do something long enough, well enough, and you set your model up correctly, which we'll teach you how to do in this series, it'll create happiness, which is, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. It allows you to be, paying your bills so you can actually enjoy life a little bit.
Right.
Sign up, the great American dream that we've created. You don't set it up correctly, you don't get it.
It's a fool's errand.
The ladder is leaning against the wrong wall when you get to the top.
Yeah. Ryan Holiday talks about passion versus purpose.
Right.
And the sort of how they're confused. And it's like passion is a temporary, exciting, almost like I think you referred to like dopamine blasts, right? Like but it's so temporary. If you don't have the purpose, again, you're going to find yourself between a rock and a hard place when things get tough. Because if you don't have that internal drive and desire to get there, you don't.
That's interesting. I never heard that before. Passion being like kindling and the purpose being the heavy firewood. You ever start a fire? Like the heavy stuff that keeps the fire going.
Exactly.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. When you go to purpose, and then he talks about Bronnie Ware's book. In the beginning of this book, he talks about the top 5 regrets of the dying. Right? Bronnie Ware was a hospice nurse, and she's big on TED Talk. She did a big TED Talk, but she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, where she was a hospice nurse, Australian hospice nurse, and she used to help people prepare for end of life, through hospice. But what she felt her job really was to listen.
Right.
And she compiled the list of the top 5. I remember the first one because as I said on my deathbed, I remembered that the top regret of the dying is to live a life true to yourself, not one that everyone else expected of you.
Yeah, I'll read them. I got them. I mean, they're incredible. I wish that I'd let myself be happier. I wish that I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And then I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the one of others, or not the life others expected of me. It's amazing because as you're going through these, it's like so many of them are antithetical to how people think and like what's pushed societally. You know what I mean?
Right.
I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Well, I mean, what if this is what we're talking about? This whole thing's about designing your message, your voice, and building a business around that. Because if you don't have a plan for that, the world will give you one. They'll hand it to you. They'll feed it to you. It'll be your plan. It'll be that. Because we used to say in financial planning, people don't plan to fail. They failed to plan. When we saw people at the end like that, because usually when that type of conversation's going on, there's usually a phone call to the office saying, can you come by? And I've sat with people before and had illustrations of different recommendations I would make to them they didn't buy because they had priorities that weren't in line with that. They didn't think they were going to die or get sick. That's a big deal But in messaging, if what's important to you isn't what you're currently doing, my suggestion is to keep listening and listen back to the ones at the beginning. I'd start from the beginning and get down with our journey, talking about essentialism, talking about lining up your dominoes and the one thing. Next week, we're looking at habits.
What stands out to me, just real quick, based on these, it's like I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I feel like that's a different interpretation of work, just because I've spent the past X years of my life trying to put myself in a position where there's literally not a negative connotation to work. Like, because I know that's, the whole work versus play thing. We touched a little bit about this, but when you intertwine what you love, right? When your big domino is something you care about so much that it's not work, it's like you look at life as this kind of puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
And, I would be upset if I didn't get to continue building this thing and it wasn't the crux of my life. That's the only thing I'm looking at this and I'm like, maybe 40, 50 years down the road, I look at it a little differently. But now it's like, I think if you aren't compartmentalizing work as something you don't want to do, there's no negative connotation. If it's one journey and you're just so excited about it, which I think is the ultimate goal, then that's not something that I'm worried about. But it's interesting to look at some of these things.
I don't know. I forget who says if you got to take a vacation from your job, you shouldn't go back.
Right.
I think what you were saying, Eddie, reminds me of when we were talking about The Alchemist with the spoon and the oil, and like you have the passion, but you're still experiencing life.
Right.
So like how you were saying, like the fear of chaos, like other parts of your life are chaos. It's like, even though it's something you love to do, you might be missing out on experiences you can't get back. Does that
makes sense? Okay, that's an interesting interpretation. So it's like, yeah, you love this, but are you looking so hard at the oil in your spoon that you're missing out on the traveling and you're missing out on different things? Maybe working too hard implies that you aren't hanging out with your friends and you aren't doing some of these things. I don't know. Balance is definitely important.
Back to the balls, right?
That's it. Yeah.
What are the glass balls? What are the rubber balls? And in the book, there's a reference to work-life balance that was almost never mentioned before the 30s, because it wasn't for whatever reason wasn't mentioned, and it was mentioned a lot in like 2007 when the stock market started crashing. I think people were running out of money. But your balance of work and life, if your work and your life are the same thing, like if you get paid to socialize or paid to create, and you love to create, and you also can figure out a way to get paid to do it, you get paid. There's people paying for everything now. You don't have to.
That's peak living.
Yeah, I mean, you can learn. There's lots of people that make money doing lots of things. And if you get paid to do what you love, you hit the mark. Right. I wanted a lifestyle-friendly business, so I knew that if I wrote a book and I could develop a message around that book, I could talk on stages, I can be interviewed, I can get paid to travel the world. I've been in 12 countries talking about my book.
That was a big domino. Yeah,
it was. It was hard to do, but it was easily doable. I mean, if I had to do it over again, it's much easier. I tried to knock this one over too many times.
Something else I'm dying to talk about. Someone asked me, what's up?
You have a book coming out too.
I'm so excited about it. It's almost done. It's almost done.
We forgot one of the reasons we did this so we could tell people about the cool stuff we work on. And he's got a picture book. It's really cool. Talk about it for 2 seconds.
Yeah. So there's, I wrote, you know what? I don't even know what to call them, but like 20 thoughts or messages or poems or, they're short. They're short passages on just different ideas to help people when their life or whatever they're going through. And so it's almost like I use the places you'll go as kind of a model. It's like there's 20 of them. And so each chapter, each lesson has, obviously the text and then this beautiful art that accompanies it. I mean, the artist is just out of this world.
He got lucky. We had a contest, and Eddie pulled this guy out of a hat, and man, this guy it's so beautiful. Did you enjoy the art?
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
It's incredible.
I'm looking forward to putting it out there.
Me too.
But that's awesome.
So that'll be probably, I'm guessing, a month or so. We'll be out there. So We'll definitely make sure you're aware of that. But before I forget, just because this has been on my radar for so long, number 5, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself. When I was walking down here the other day, I put on my Instagram story, I said, just guys, I'm doing a podcast, teaming up with some awesome folks, been wanting to do this. I know a lot of people have been asking about it. If anything jumps off the page at you, that we talk about, what's one of those things? And someone said authenticity. How do I remain authentic? And I've been thinking a lot about that, because I feel like if you feel like you're living a life that's not yours, or you feel like you're wearing a mask and you're not being who you are, it's not a good thing. But delved a little bit deeper, and it's like, how do you get to the core of your authenticity if everything is essentially influenced by society or by something, right? So like, what is the bottom layer of that authenticity? Because I was obviously thinking about it in terms of what I do. Mm-hmm. Like, am I being authentic? I'm doing what I think is right, but how do you know where to draw that line? And I thought that'd be a fun thing to bring up here.
Well, I know this. We haven't rehearsed very much about this. We curated the books, and I think we've done a good job of lining them up. But as far as authentic, this is right off the cuff.
Right.
This is something that we're sharing. These are books that we talk about all the time, and it was a shame because after we read books, we talk about them with each other. And I said, "Wow, if there was a camera on, people would benefit from the book." So if you read these books along with us, you can actually read the book we're doing next week before we go over it. You go over it with us. You learn. There's a higher level of learning. You learn like you're going to teach it to someone else.
Yeah.
And nothing. I don't think anything's more authentic than that.
Well, speaking of, have we been saying the book the week before?
It's Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
I don't know if we said the
we
one
have?
thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so
we're doing Atomic Habits next week. There's three good habit books we could talk about, and we'll probably ripple into all of them. But
right. Atomic Habits to me is the best out of the 3.
They're all good.
Yeah. But
Charles Duhigg did a nice one too. They're both good books.
Yeah, my Audible's marked up with lots of notes, and there's a lot of fun like tidbits and like stuff that little fun facts, quotes, stuff like that.
Yeah, Steve, you talked about having questions and when people interacting with our conversation. Mm-hmm. How do they do that?
Oh, they can just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. They can just drop a question there. On the YouTube as well, they can drop a comment. If we don't get to it the episode that we talk about the book, we'll get to it in the Q&A that we're going to do.
Awesome.
Also, besides that I'm excited about Habits is that these first couple episodes were kind of setting us up, and now Habits feel like we're about to take action. Mm-hmm. So if there's anything you want to talk about, turning that corner from the first 3 episodes to these next ones going forwards.
Sort of the theoretical to the tangible.
Yeah. There you go.
That'll be fun. Cool. Well, hey, that's a wrap, I think. Another incredible conversation. I had fun.
Yeah, I mean, habits are going to be the next step into creating a directional, creating a path that's directionally on course to sharing your voice, building a business around it. I mean, ultimately, that's where we're going. That's our big domino for you if you're watching, listening, or both. And we have the power of habit is not next. It's Atomic Habit. It's the third time. I do not lend books to anybody. I won't do it. If I give you a book, I buy it again.
Think about it?
Yeah, because I don't want to be pissed off at someone taking a book. Someone says, "Can I borrow this book?" I said, "I don't lend books. I'll give it to you if I want to." This is a great book, James Clear, the Atomic Habit. So,
see you next week.
All right, take care, guys.
Be good.